Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order of our regular board meeting of December 13th, 2022. And the Board of Education acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. We would like to thank them for the privilege of living on their land and the gift of working with their children. And I'd like to welcome Ramona Johnson from the Comox First Nation. Wherever you would like.
Feels comfortable.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sotsa Haitsinga, and my other, which means giving, and that's from my grandma. I'm from the Billy family, and I'm very fortunate to have two names. The other one is Kulu Magala, which means warrior, for everything I've been going through over these few years. But I'd like to welcome you to your meeting. Very exciting. Nice to see all your faces in person. An in-person meeting is great. And we're on the unceded territory of the Puntledge, Satlut, Sasitla, and the Ayakson. And I brought Nicholas with me, so he could give you a nice welcome with the drum and sing for us. So, Nicholas.
Hello, my name is Nicholas. I come from the Comox First Nation, and I'm saying hello. So I'm a little nervous right now. It's my first time driving from London, so
Yes, and he is a graduate from the Nalatsi program. And I asked him if he would come with me when I'm doing things, because I'm new at this too. So I'm a new member of the Neoxila elders. So I'm a new elder to the group. And Nicholas said he would come with me when I, so we're our first one. You're great. You're doing great. Yes, you're doing that fabulous.
I've lost my train of thought. Sorry, I'm very nervous right now.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's okay, we're
So,
not there.
So are some of us.
yeah. And why don't I get the gift out while you're.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Okay.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Nicholas is helping so free. This is last year.
So for the trustees, you know I got the three of you with those other three silly little ones.
Always remember to play.
And then
I loved it.
oh, there's six of you?
Seven of us.
Seven of
But
you.
one of us not here tonight.
Oh, she's there.
She's actually over there on the screen there. It's Christy.
Hi, Christy. I'm gonna leave yours with Sure.
Michelle.
Michelle?
Sure.
So in your bags is just a little gift to remind you whenever you need it that your whole new job is here too. And each of you have a different animal. I actually use it as a worry myself, but you can figure what you would like to use it for on your own. But enjoy.
Beautiful. Thank you.
We're good. Okay.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ramona.
I also taught him Indigenous K.
And Ramona and Nicholas were supposed to be with us at our November meeting, but because we did it virtually, they weren't able to attend. So it's very special that they're here tonight.
I look forward to seeing him come back again soon. That was great.
Yes, indeed. That was wonderful.
And I got the eagle, which is what I've been told before is my spirit animal.
Oh, so did I.
I'm very excited.
All right, everybody's unpacking their gifts.
I know, sorry.
Sorry. I like
Who would
to
like
put
to
mine on.
move the adoption of the agenda? With an amendment?
Yes, there, Madam Chair, there's
Yeah.
an addition to the agenda under my report. Item 2 will be Hornby Island title at 2100 Zolan's Road.
And trustee Howe, would you like to move the agenda as amended?
Yes, please.
Is there a seconder? Thank you, trustee Caton. There's a mover and a seconder to the adoption of the amended agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please show. Down, opposed, it's carried, thank you. Next, we'll move on to the board meeting minutes. Looking for a mover to move the motion that the Board of Education for School District Number 71, Comox Valley, adopt the November 29, 2022 regular public meeting minutes as presented. Trustee Caton, seconder, trustee Leslie. Any discussion?
A quick question. I'm not sure if this is the right time, but my name is misspelled in
Okay.
a whole section of it, so I'm just wondering if that can be corrected before we adopt and continue.
Motion to adopt the minutes as amended.
Great, thank you, trustee Caton. Seconder to that? Great, thank you. Is there any other discussion on the November 29th minutes? No? Seeing none, thank you. All those in favor, please show. Down, it's carried, thank you very much. There was no unfinished business from the November 29th minutes. And next we'll move to the record of in-camera meetings and minutes. And sharing that we had a meeting on November the 29th. It was a regular in-camera meeting. I'm going to give a very brief board chair's report and welcome all of you to our meeting tonight in person. It's great to see all of you. Thank you to all of the staff and senior leadership and presenters for attending, as well as for the public who's here in person and watching us virtually from the comforts of their home. So we met very recently, it was just 2 weeks ago, and since then we were busy at the BC School Trustee Academy, or BC School Trustee Association Academy, and it was a wonderful opportunity to learn together and to connect with other trustees throughout the province. We do have a very full agenda tonight, and so that is the end of my comments for tonight. Because you will notice the timed agenda before you, and we're going to do our very best to stay on track to give everything in the agenda its due, including the very first thing that's going to be happening tonight in terms of presentations. Our presentation is on supporting student health, and we have the Director of Inclusive Education, Sean Lamoureux, the Director of Instruction, Jay Dixon, and the outreach counselors and teacher leads, Tara Ryan, Carla Lasota, and Jill Katapski. Don't look at it, just say it. Okay, great. Over to you. Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
So this is a follow-up, trustees, from a motion that was made in June around identifying what's been happening in our district. And in the meantime, the ministry issued some new directives, and so we took advantage of it and had it all presented from our inclusive ed and our outreach workers, counselors, to let everyone know what's been happening in our business and what are we doing. So over to Director Lamoureux.
So thank you, Chair Waite, and thank you, Superintendent DeMayo. And thank you for the trustees to inviting us us here tonight to speak on this topic. As mentioned, my name's Sean Lamoureux. I'm the Director of Inclusive Ed, and I have the honor of working with the district and school counselors on all issues processing student health, such as consent and gender-based violence. To my right is Mr. Jay Dixon, Director of Instruction Secondary. Mr. Dixon facilitates the student health platform. This includes everything from curriculum, resources, guest speakers, to professional development. And I'm very honored to have three of our outstanding outreach counselors sitting beside me. And this is Ms. Ryan Katapsky and Mrs. Lasota. They're actually teacher leads within the counseling department as well. And what that means is under their portfolios are many of the student health topics that we're going to hear about. So Mrs. Katapsky leads a GSA and the SOGI. Ms. Ryan leads mental health, suicide protocols, and Counselor's Corner, which you'll hear a little bit about a little later. And then Ms. Lasota leads sexual health, consent education, and mature minor. All three of these counselors play a role in supporting our district with critical incidents, violent threat risk assessments, and disclosures. Now, at the school board meeting in June, trustees discussed gender-based violence and consent. And the topic of consent and sexual assaults has been at the forefront of our district for many years, largely the result of the hard work of the DPAC and some current trustees who are with us here tonight. It is one of the main reasons our district is a provincial leader in supporting student health. Everything from developing curriculum, bringing in guest speakers, providing additional staffing, and implementing change. Our intent for tonight is twofold. The first is to provide an outline of everything that School District 71 is doing to support student health, specifically consent education and gender-based violence. The second part is to identify any opportunities to make our district even stronger in these areas. You want to facilitate it? Okay, not a problem. So three main sections to our presentation. The first is how gender-based violence is processed in 71. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about staffing, statistics, and then how we process disclosures that occur within our schools. The second, Mr. Dixon will touch on the curriculum, guest speakers, some of the good work that's occurring, as well as building capacity, okay, within our district. At the end, we'll have some time, hopefully, to answer any questions that you might have. Josh. So to start off, when it comes to gender-based violence, sexual harassment, and assaults, any number is too many. And that's the bottom line. It's important to have our most trained staff processing our most sensitive and complex issues. Our school counselors are outstanding. They take the lead on all complex student health issues like disclosures, self-harm, critical incidents, suicide, and assaults. Through the great work of the previous director, Ms. Esther Schatz, SD 71 is one of the only districts I'm aware of in BC that has embedded counselors in all our schools, including elementary. And over the last 2 years, we have been fortunate enough to increase the counseling FTE in 9 schools, including Glacier View and Lelotzi. And we've been able to add 2 additional outreach counselors to help support the needs that have arisen throughout and around student health. All our SD 71 counselors have a baseline level of qualifications. They have a master's degree in counseling or a related field like psychology. And they have demonstrated experience servicing students and working and accessing community resources. All our counselors also have a range of additional qualifications as they continually upgrade. Every one of them are trained in ASSIST, which is suicide prevention. Every one of them are trained in VITRA, which is violent threat risk assessment. On top of that, last year alone, we had a group of counselors that were further trained in grief and loss, another group that were trained in trauma-informed practices, and a third that were trained through Stanford University on compassionate systems. And some counselors, like Mrs. Katapsky and Ms. Ryan, who are seated beside me, are actually registered clinical counselors as well. Ms. Lasota, Ms. Katapsky, Ms. Ryan, as teacher leads within our district, provide oversight and consultation on all disclosures that occur within our district. They lead discussions, process scenarios in all of our meetings. Our first one this year was in September, the last one we had just last week. They produce a newsletter to update current information for all our counselors relating to student health. They liaise with the RCMP and with community agencies. Recently, they met with RCMP school liaison officers. Another meeting was with RCMP Victim Services, and a third meeting with community-based victim services. The three counselors develop local resources, and they collate information. And I'll show Counselor's Corner in just a bit. They set up guest speakers for our schools, and since they're itinerant counselors, they're accessible for consults or to sit down with counselors to help process some of our difficult situations. As well as being employees of SD 71, on top of their code of ethics and on top of duty to report, they're still regulated by admin policies and procedures, depending on the situations that arise. The last part is district awareness. Go ahead, Josh. All of our schools have a website, and the counselors work together, and they use these resources to help support students in counseling, students with issues that arise, as well as families. So this one is specifically from Vanier. Each school has autonomy on how they do this, and it's only from S to B, but the three that are up there directly relate to the topic we're discussing tonight. Go ahead, Josh. In a lot of these cases, parents will go home after having discussions with counselors or students, and then they'll access resources. The one you see right now is called Counselor's Corner. And all you have to do is go to our district website, and then you can access it through Parent Info or Learn 71. Go ahead, Josh. Tara, do you want to talk on this one a little bit?
Sure. So, Counselor's Corner is something that I've been working on for about 8 years now. It started by just doing a newsletter, a monthly newsletter to send out to the counselors in the district and some staff. And by last year, the year before, it was going out to all admin, all counselors, youth and family workers, and many parents when the principals chose to send it out. So that was a newsletter, and then over the summer, I decided that it would be helpful to have a website with some of our favorite resources as counselors to suggest to parents, a place to send them where they could just look things up, some of our favorite books, our favorite websites that address each topic. So you can see there's lots of topics from ADHD, suicidal ideation, trauma, and consent as well. And by clicking on one of those, some are more developed than others, I'm still working on them, but by clicking on one of those, you can see it broken down into various resources that both our counselors use and our families use as well. Along the side, which you can't see here, are different resources that you can go to for extra help in the community and in the province, as well as a link to all of the Counselor's Corner newsletters that I've written up over the last couple of years. And again, each of those has a specific topic that it focuses on, and those are also linked under each heading that they apply to.
So just to give you an idea, Josh, if you click the next one. So this is Counselor's Corner specific to consent. So you'll notice on the top, any parent, student, community member can access where it says resources. If you hit safer sex, if you hit consent, if you hit stigma, that'll bring up a variety of different resources. There's quotes. Right below the first quote is the new health guide that was just released about 2 weeks ago. There's the elementary one and the secondary one. It's got great information. Below that are some Canadian websites directly relating to sexual health, okay, Q&A. On the right, you'll have access to posters. Some of those you can click in their videos, and then you'll notice on the bottom are some Q&A as well as some articles to be read. This is one that's a little bit longer because there's more information. If you click it again, Josh, you'll notice that on the right hand side, on the bottom there, is our links to the resources that can be accessed in the community. So RCMP victim resources, community-based victim resources, and as well as erase websites. So at any time, you know, and each website breaks down a little bit different. If you go back, Josh, just go back two more, sorry. If you go back one more. So every one of these boxes, if you click it, will have similar information that you just saw with consent that can be accessed by our community, our parents, and our students. You can go right back to, thanks Josh, one more. Now, one of the questions we sometimes get asked is, how do we know? And when it comes to statistics, the district is fortunate to have access to many different sources of local data with direct information about our students. The surveys you see up there are just surveys related to student health and social emotional. We have a committee in our district that's chaired by Miss Allison Cavalinas, who's the vice principal of NIDES, and they review all the information that comes in from surveys and then lets us know what the trends are that they're seeing within our district. On the left there, you see the McCreary report. And McCreary is a fantastic organization that has been doing a report since 1992. They do it every 5 years, grades 7 to 12, and it's the Adolescent Health Survey. They release their information in 3 ways. The first is through the province. The second is through specific areas. In our case, it would be the Northern Island. And these general overviews are available to anyone in the public. The third way they release it is to individual districts. And the information that's released to districts has questions under specific subheadings, like sexual health, violence, discrimination, mental health. Go ahead, Josh. Now, I got a hold of McCreary. You can see the actual report for the Comox Valley on the right. This is the exact information about our students. When I got a hold of McCreary a few weeks ago, I asked them the question that I knew would come up, and that is, why isn't this information released? And the first thing that Annie Smith, who's the executive director for McCreary, mentioned to me is that in comparing districts, the information would be statistically invalid because some of our districts have 75,000 students plus, some are under 800. Even if you look at our northern comparison, one of our districts is over 10,000, one is under around 800. So the information and the variances and selected responses gets lost in comparison. The second reason is, she said, some of their information they receive is not releasable. So they'll put an NR beside it. And the reason for that is it wouldn't take much information, okay, or minimal work to ascertain the area and the exact school where an incident has occurred. So they call that deductive disclosure. Okay, and they protect and hide that information for the safety of kids. The third one is they combine questions. So the statistics for SD71, and I'll give you one example, they've combined a question to increase releasability on sexual abuse, forced sexual activity, and the first time a student has had sex. Okay, this is how specific the questions actually come. They round numbers. The percentages are less accurate due to the rounding of numbers. They exclude some students. Alternative students and homeschool students are excluded. When I asked the question why, her response was this was a decision made by health and local districts at the time. They are reviewing that though. And then the survey has limitations. It's been administered in the past on paper and in English, which excludes some youth with certain disabilities and literacy and comprehension challenges. Now, McCreary is fantastic to work with. They've agreed to allow us to do our next survey in 2 months electronically. And the joy of that is they'll give us our data right after that. We don't have to wait for comparisons for the province or for the Northern Island. These are the reasons why the public, they do not release the data to the public. Go ahead, Josh. Now, not releasing the data to the public and not having access to the data is quite separate. We currently have local data on student health, assaults, and consent. And the new report, like I mentioned, will be collated in a few months. Information from the different sources, and you can see them on the right there, the surveys, feedback from students, from PACs, trustees, and the community inform our decisions and provide our direction moving forward. It's a direct result of that we've made some of the changes that you'll see. Okay, and Director Dixon's going to elaborate on it, but to give you the Coles Notes version, we've increased staffing. I mentioned 9 schools, 2 outreach counselors, 2 that are sitting here right now. We talk about increased budgets. That was done as a school board decision so that every school would not have to worry about paying for guest speakers to come in or for resources. Okay, it does not come out of their pocket, it comes out of the district. We have district oversight to ensure consistency, okay, when we're dealing with situations. We have guest speakers, you've heard about the newsletters, and developing curriculum. Now what I'd like to do is just introduce Carla Lasota, and you can hit one more there, Josh. And what Carla will do is walk you through what happens as a school counselor in a school when a student comes to talk to them about some of these sensitive issues.
gender-based violence occurs. Disclosures most often come to us in the following ways in the school. So directly from the students themselves, from a friend who comes to tell us, a direct phone call or email from a parent or guardian. A student tells a teacher, administrator, educational assistant, Indigenous support worker, who then gives us that information. A staff member may also overhear a conversation in the hallway or in their class, and then they come and tell us that information. And how is it processed after the disclosure? So every gender-based violent incident that's brought to the attention of a school counselor, regardless of the location or the time of the incident that it occurred, is processed through our district protocol. Staff are aware that they need to always pass this type of information on to the counselor. Our role is then to support the student from a trauma-informed lens. Once a student is with the counselor, there are some exploratory questions that we ask. These are brief questions, as we don't ever want to taint a possible investigation, and we don't want to do more harm to the student who's already been so vulnerable to share their disclosure. So we would ask, when did the incident occur? Where did it occur? Who did it involve? And then just a brief description of what the incident was. The conversation with the student helps the counselor to understand the situation and then to determine the next steps. And an example of that, it helps the counselor to ascertain the difference between a student who, for example, is at the vending machine, bends down to get their item, stands back up, and their elbow accidentally bumps a student behind them, versus a student being touched inappropriately without consent. The information gathered guides the counselor in providing the necessary support and allows the student to understand the services and resources that are available to them. All choices are student-led, supporting the process of trauma-informed counseling. We offer support to the student through the following ways: talking to their parents or guardians about the incident with them, discussions with the RCMP, connecting them or referencing them to our local resources, which include RCMP Victim Services, Community-Based Victim Services, Victim Link BC Services, SAFE, which is a sexual abuse intervention program for children and youth, and the ERASE website, which stands for Expect, Respect, and a Safe Education. These resources are listed all on our secondary, alternative, and middle school websites, as you saw there. I think you showed that under Programs and Services and then Counseling Department. And often, families are presented with all the resources available to them and that discuss with the school counselors, and then they access these resources from home sometimes, so it's separate from the school. It's their choice, and it's often a good time for them to go home, talk about it, and process it. So taking the time to decide what their next steps are is really important. Counselors provide a variety of follow-up support with the students and the parents as well. And then just two notes to end with that were touched on is that if there is a new school counselor and they have any questions or concerns when an incident or a disclosure comes, the outreach counselors, and we're fortunate to have 3 of us, one of us is always available at that time to talk to them through text or through phone. They would send us and we would call them and have a discussion or go see them. And the outreach counselors recently did meet, as said, with the RCMP, Community Victim Services, and spoke with RCMP Victim Services, and we just feel super fortunate for the working relationship that we have with them and their ability to answer any questions or concerns that we have. Thank you.
All right, my turn. So I've handed to each of the trustees a package. Inside that package is a copy of our PowerPoint and copies of the student health guides that Director Lamoureux has mentioned. So we have a package. One of them is our elementary guide, and one is our secondary guide. I'm going to summarize them in a couple slides ahead, but at a couple points, I might refer to these guides. This is your homework, trustees, and this is all of our principals, vice principals, counselors, and teachers' homework moving forward as well. So I'm going to start and talk about where we are from a learning perspective. So about district is working closely with DPAC to begin educating staff and students around the valley around the topic of sexual health and consent. As a director who joined the Comox Valley last year, I was truly impressed with the partnership between School District 71 and our local community support groups around the topic. I really was impressed just with the advocacy and the support throughout the valley around student health. Next slide there, Josh. What have we been doing? Well, I think we've built a foundation here. That's a good way to summarize it over the past few years. A beginning point that moving forward we can grow on. So, previous slide, Josh. That foundation really includes an awareness campaign, educational resources such as Counselor's Corner and other resources that we've been distributing around the schools, training materials we've been developing over the past couple of years, teacher and counselor pro-D, time for planning. We had feedback from some teachers in our school that they just needed some time to get together in the afternoon. So we've been providing that time. Sexual health education workshops. I believe around COVID we began with an online workshop at the time with Dr. Carrie Isham from Power Up. And we decided last year to really bring Carrie in more. So our schools brought Carrie in online last year, and we decided to grow that out. Now we go to the next slide. So over the past few years, we've been working with a variety of sexual health providers. And I've got a long list, but I was going to tag to Jill to maybe explain some examples from the past couple of years that I know our school counselors and teachers have come to you and you've come to me for support.
Okay, yeah, sure. This is a new role to me as a district outreach, so I've been the Isfeld school counselor for 6 years before that. So I kind of know a little more what's going on in the high schools than the elementary schools, so I'll speak to that. Actually, last year we brought Carrie Isham into Isfeld in person for 4 sessions for our grade 11s and 12s, 2 for the grade 11s, 2 for the grade 12s. She started with healthy relationships, some kind of basic sex ed stuff as her first session with the grade 11s and 12s. And then she did a big one on consent with the grade 11s. Focused the whole session on grade 11s on consent, really. And with the grade 12s, I might be messing that up. She also did sex trafficking, pornography awareness, grooming, sexual abuse cycle, child abuse cycle. Super great. We've also bought from her, and that might be from the trustees. I can't remember. It might have come from the DPAC. We got that 6-part package paid for.
Absolutely. We provided the elementary schools access to a 6-part package, and our high schools a district-wide subscription to her online series.
So I know Highland and Vanier have been using that. Highland and Isfeld, I'm not sure about Vanier, but Highland and Isfeld have. Vanier has had, last year as well, had their presenters come. I don't remember who they had though. Highland had Carrie Isham as well, and continues to this year. We've already had, Isfeld's had Carrie back this year once already, and so it's Highland. They've done some really great stuff in the high schools this year with consent education as well. Counselors prepared really easy to present and interactive and informative slideshow for the teachers to present, and they did, so that went through all the classes. Let's see what else. I'd like to also say, and I don't know if this is in here, that the SOGI, I'm really impressed with what's happening in our district around sexual orientation, gender identity, education and support for our youth, because we do know that they are our most vulnerable group, really. So we have, in all of our schools, in all the high schools and elementary schools, we have a sexual orientation, gender identity lead, and at least 1, and sometimes 2 or 3 reps as well. So we've got pretty active Queer Allies clubs in our high schools, actually really growing, and it's just such a great supportive place, right? And our elementary schools all have inclusivity, little rainbow clubs and things happening into even from really young, like kindergarten and up at many of the schools. And so that's something I wanted to add in here too, because I think that really comes into play with taking care of their sexual health too.
Thank you.
I could say more, but that was
Jill is passionate about the work and is often on the phone referring teachers to myself to get supports and resources to help them in their classrooms. I'm going to flip to the next slide. And this is really what we're doing this year so far. So in the past, we've organized workshops in the spring. This year, we jumped right into fall education. So we've pretty much doubled down on the amount of workshops for our high school students. We have already had sessions, and we intend to have more sessions in the spring. And that kind of sets the tone for the year and creates that opportunity for follow-up questions. We've increased sessions, we're adding sessions to Glacier View, Nalaxy. We're investing in more resource kits, they're called, for classroom teachers. And we continue to allot budget for support and training options. One piece that we're looking at in the new year is Options for Sexualhealth.org has a train-the-trainer type model for counselors and teachers. So that was brought to our attention last summer, and it's something we're exploring this year. Next one, Josh. This is just one quick example of a high school model incorporating grade 8, 9, 10, and developing activities that our grade 11 and 12 students have to do. And this model, if you look at the secondary guide in your handbook, the new health guides, it's mirrored in these guides. These guides recommend what you could be doing grade 8, 9, 10, and options or potential options for grade 11, 12. This was developed last year by one of our school teams. Next one. And now the guides. So these splashy guides here are excellent resources. We've already got them in front of our principals. We've got them in front of our counseling teams. And the intent moving forward is to get them in front of as many teachers as possible and start moving towards using these guides to help us in the work. Go to the next slide. So what they do is they create that starting point, provides a common language around all the topics. And teachers are encouraged to treat health education as a regular ongoing study rather than the once a year type piece. And also it just promotes a deeper holistic understanding and direction for existing supports. These are great starting points now to supplement the work that we've been doing. So we're quite keen to open these up and start supporting our teachers with them. And the next slide we threw in just a quick, I'm not going to read it all, but that's a quick snapshot from the table of contents of all the topics that have support materials inside these guides. And there's a lot of links in them, pathways to reference materials. I do believe that our teachers will find these guides supportive in the work, and our counselors as well. Really taking a look at all of these, we really want to get back into where we go next. And what we'll use in our next steps is an expanded Erase website that's coming soon. And on the bottom, in the little red box, the government's already updated some resources around gender-based violence. There's more coming as well. Also, our curriculum will have some what's called elaborations added to our physical health and education curriculum, which will support our teachers in what they do in their classrooms. And upcoming, there's going to be webinars and training opportunities designed and offered by Safe Schools Together. And that's a great website. If you have the opportunity to check it out, Google Safe Schools Together. And there's a variety of parent resources and presentations on there too. I'm gonna go to the next slide. I know we've gone way over time. Apologies. What are our priorities come New Year, 2023, this spring? Staff awareness. We want everyone to be aware of these guides, the opportunities for training moving forward. Our district and school counseling teams will continue to have conversations around using these guides as supports for our district, and our school teachers. This should be sitting on every school teacher's desk. And our schools should be having conversations about the content inside the guide. Parent awareness. We want to get this message out. We want to make sure that parents are aware of these guides as well. And we will be posting them in different locations and sharing them via our schools and our packs. And really, we want to provide this spring support for school teams to implement more sexual health education. So whether that's planning within their staff meetings, training, co-teaching, there's a variety of options. Also, really, we're committed to invest in resources to support the work. As I mentioned when I started, wow, the district committed with budget and a healthy budget to support our teachers, which will directly support our students. We want to continue our workshops. We'll have more coming through the spring. We also have a variety of sexual health educators. The messaging from the schools and from the students was we always don't want the same person. Okay, so how do we bring in different presenters? So this year we're bringing in still Carrie Isham, but also Jessica Woolen. And she's doing more and more sessions throughout the schools as well. Sometimes, one school we're bringing 2 in within a short window of each other, I believe. Also, options for sexual health. As I mentioned, training. And as we kind of dig into that website a little more, I think that has great potential for those that are interested in following up with it. Student voice. That's something that I heard loud and clear last year when meeting with the students. They wanted an opportunity to share their point of view and really provide some input on who's coming into their schools. And that's, I believe, an area of growth. We've started some conduits for our students to sit down with their superintendent or directors and others, and we're looking at growing that out more as well. And most importantly, as one of our strengths in the Comox Valley is our connections with each other and our community. How do we build more connections with local experts to support our students? And that is going to be continued conversation, brainstorming, and networking to really support all of the work as a whole. This is a great guide. The work that the Valley has been doing for the past few years is clearly shown in that guide. Go to the next slide, Josh. And we've really kind of given you lots of information. There's a tremendous amount of work being done, but we all believe it's just the beginning. And we're excited to keep moving forward in the work. So thank you. I'm not sure, Trustee Wade, if we have time for questions from trustees.
I believe we do. First off, I wanted to thank all of you very much and everybody else behind the scenes that worked at creating this, pulling all this information together to showcase what we're doing in our district and the work that's being done, like through the ministry, integrated into the district as well. So I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to all of the people we can see here tonight and heard from, as well as everybody else who worked on all of that. What I'd like to do is, if the trustees have questions, we're going to have the directors capture a couple of questions, so and then try to bundle the responses in order to give the opportunity for as many trustees who have questions to have them answered. So if anybody has a question, please just raise your hand, and then we'll take the questions and they'll write them down and then respond. So, Trustee Leslie.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say a wealth of information, but also also just how much I support the work that's being done. I know my family has benefited from that work, and my heart goes out to the immediate response and the wraparound, and having personally benefited and my children from this, I want to say thank you. And my question is, this information is invaluable, and I just read through it. Of course, I just had a glance, but I noticed how invaluable it was. My question is, will there be, or is there, a process in place where this information would be disseminated or facilitated in classrooms on a regular basis? In other words, I know that through career and life education, which is K-12, there are opportunities for educators to support this kind of learning in all classrooms, not just 5 or 6 times a year, but throughout the process of learning daily or weekly. That's one of my questions.
So then if that's one of your questions, then Trustee Caton, I think I saw your hand.
So once again, thank you for this information. It's invaluable, and I'm looking forward to continuing more. And I'm hoping through the board and through the chair and superintendent, we can continue the dialogue and have more deeper conversations in that, because a 20-minute or 30-minute is a lot on that one there. And I just have a question, and I know that you talked a lot tonight about sexual health and consent, but the other #1 issue with our students right now is supporting the healing in the mental health and the stigma. And I'm wondering at a later date, because I know that is one that we talk about, is dealing with the stigma in mental health. If we could, through the chair and superintendent, have a conversation. What are we doing to bring in support workers and support? And the concern is the stigma on mental health, and how do we destigmatize mental health, and it's okay to say that I'm having a bad day, and the comment is, oh, you'll get over it. I mean, we have to, how do we talk to those dealing with mental health in a way to support them rather than speaking down to them? And I think that's a deeper conversation as a district we need to have, because it all ties in. So that would be my takeaway from this, and I'm gonna go home and read this because this is invaluable, and I thank you again for the work that you're doing. And being a trustee for 17 years, I'll say our district is far above many other districts in the work they do supporting our district. And that goes to you guys at that table over there and what you bring to our students. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Caton. Does anybody have a question specific to the presentation that we could add to the list? Do you?
Sure, I have one question. Yeah, of course, thank you. We're happy to be in this room with, I know some people have really championed this, being at this table, and all are now together championing it, hopefully, and learning together. Speaking of learning together, I'm a little curious, a little more. I know that Jill spoke to the parent involvement a little bit in terms of counseling, and I'd like to know a little more about how some of that learning together piece happens when these programs are brought forward to both the students and families together, because some of these are hard conversations and start with uncomfortable conversations, and I think the generational divide might cause the conversations to stop sooner. So is there a lot of opportunity for the students and families to be hearing the information together and receiving support together outside of just the counseling office? Just something I'm curious about.
Thank you for that question. Are there any other trustees that have a question? Go ahead.
I have 3, so I'll blurt them all out. And if we don't have time for all of them, I do understand. My first concerns the reference to our strong GSA groups, and whether there's been any movement towards expanding the sexual health to be more inclusive, because I know we've heard some complaints from concerns raised from them. The second question I have is around, let me back up and say thank you very much for the presentation. It's really, really thorough. One of the was raised was, and that I really appreciate, is learning about the full disclosure process. And I'm wondering if at the end of that process, if there is any sharing of the information from the counselor who is kind of the last person who gets, or who's speaking with the student, to the district level, so that there's someone within the district who is knowledgeable about any and all complaints that are coming forward from our schools, and particularly on an annual basis, that we can be seeing whether we're getting more complaints or less. And I mean, there's also, of course, the whole question about, are we getting more because we're creating more inclusive environment, and our students are more aware of this issue, and therefore feel stronger and more capable of bringing them forward. I'm not necessarily saying that more is worse at this point. It may actually be a reflection of a better system that we're creating. And then my third question is one that I've raised with both Director Lamoureux and Director Dixon in the past, and it concerns, my understanding is that there is a draft reporting protocol that the ministry has released to the Safe Schools coordinator in each district, and that it hasn't been provided beyond that one person in the district. But I know that someone at the district level had been looking for it last spring, and I'm wondering if there's any update on whether it's been located.
Okay, so you have a lot of questions. I was hoping that some of them were nuanced and there could be some summary answers, but maybe not. If you want a moment just to confer or pick them off. I think we need to just keep it with these right now. Yeah.
Would be one we have to follow up with at a later date in terms of draft reporting protocol to be seen. That's okay. Movement for sexual health delivery connected to GSA and suggestions. The youth act, they have fantastic, I was in the meeting, fantastic suggestions. I think these guides will be a beginning point to start those conversations and to really start supporting our teachers in that education. So I think it's still at an early stage, but this will help guide those conversations forward. There's some resources links within that hopefully allow us to find some new guest speakers and resources for these topics. That's the question. The other one that I could connect to is
ask around disclosure, and does somebody up here know yes? Right there. That's the information, Director Lamoureux works with counselors and does a check-in, and there is a reporting type mechanism that he has developed with his team to get information and is able to track that.
Thank you. And thank you, we all want to thank you for the support.
All right, well, like you said, I'm sure we all have lots of questions, and you would be more than willing with your knowledge base to talk for a long time on this, and we appreciate that. And we may circle back at some point if we ask the superintendent too many questions, then he may say, okay, it's time to bring you all back because the trustees still have a lot of questions, which wouldn't surprise me. I know that maybe not all the questions were fully answered, and maybe because you're on the hot seat and there's a lot of questions, my attempt at trying to synthesize maybe didn't work as well as I'd hoped. And so if there are specific questions that the trustees have that are still unanswered or come to mind, then we will direct them to the superintendent. Okay. And once again, thank you all for the work that you've done on this presentation and the work that you're doing in our district. Okay. Next, and moving on, maybe. Oh, absolutely. I didn't think that was up to me. But if the counselors would like to leave, you're more than welcome to. You're also more than welcome to stay, knowing that if there's any hard questions in the public question period, that the directors will be here to answer them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
No, that's okay. No, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure. Yeah, no worries. Alrighty, so we are on number 9 in the agenda, and I just want to make sure that we have our trustee who's coming in remotely with us still. She's trying. Before I carry on, we'll just give her a second. Oh, she's here? Okay, super. Okay, all right. I just want to make sure you were with us still, or not trying to be, or somewhere else that you didn't want to be.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Alrighty, so committee of the whole, it's just for information only that our next committee of the whole closed meeting is January the 10th at 4 o'clock. And I will now move on to number 10, strategic directions, with the first piece being over to our superintendent.
Thank you very much. Trustees, you have in front of you the board business newsletter that will be going out that highlights many of the things that are happening in our district. And this is I'd like to say in 3 short weeks since our last board meeting, but some of them prior to that. I'm just going to highlight a few things here of some of the what's been happening, and then bring us to a couple of other points, some of the presentations we have. Just draw your attention to ardent students learning about salmon through an Indigenous lens. And very fortunate that there was a learning opportunity focused on the importance of salmon. Day 1, special guest Corey Frank helped with showing students how to clean, fillet, and brine salmon. Day 2, there were tours in the inner courtyard where there was a smokehouse set up with more salmon dissections. Lynn Swift, Alex Jules was a storyteller, and Miss Fly ran the smokehouse all day. Sarah Cool, a teacher, dissected and displayed salmon in the foyer for the scientific exploration. There were discussions around preserving salmon to keep and about being wise with harvesting to preserve future salmon stocks. Great learning event for the students of Arden. Congratulations to them. I'd be remiss if we didn't share, we've talked a lot about EDIS. Over 1,100 bags were packaged, and it really is it's my pleasure to recognize the province of BC is honoring Chantel Stephan to select and receive a Medal of Good Citizenship. We're very grateful for Chantel's dedication and leadership. Chantel has led the EDS Everyone Deserves a Smile campaign in School District 71 for 15 years. The award was announced just as the Everyone Deserves a Smile bag were being packaged and was in full swing. Thousands of bags were packed. Each bag is a student-drawn art with personal messages and encouragement. And I hope trustees had the opportunity to get out there and see that. It's truly a remarkable event, and so congratulations to Chantel for her continuous commitment. Students were from Highland and Isveld were treated to the speaking and lessons taught by Chief Woodletty Speck around oral traditions. He welcomed English First Peoples 11 students in the morning of December 6th, where he shared some stories of the ancestors, legends of transformers, and tradition versus modernity. And thanks to Lelena Jules, Indigenous Education Curriculum Support Teacher, for organizing the event. And I'm not sure if any trustees were able to make that event, but
Two of us were
Did
there,
you? Perfect.
Trustee May and
Yeah.
Susan.
great, wonderful, so nice to hear, and I know that that will continue, and we will again forward that to trustees if you can make it. Great event, the Hacker Girl Day event at Isveld. Over 80 students, grades 6 to 9, came to do some STEM and coding activities. Dubbed it the Hacker Day event, and I know our director of technology, Josh Porter, made sure he left his cell phone and all devices in his car because he didn't want him to get hacked when he went in there. But a very successful event, and so thank you to everyone who put that event on. So those are just a small sampling, and those are in your package. I do also want to draw your attention that at Cumberland in the Strathcona gym, there are currently 2 totems being carved. Local Indigenous artist Carver Everson with friend and mentor Junior Henderson agreed to carve 2 welcome figures to go on the land of the new housing project in Cumberland. They hope to have those finished by the end of 2022. So if you get a chance, nice opportunity to go in and see some of the beautiful work that's being done. So on that, I'm going to leave that part. Lots going on, right up, and lots of wrap-up activities happening this week, a lot of luncheons, concerts. We will all be making our way around to concerts and to different luncheons and serving, help out at Lake Trail and different schools. So it's a busy time in our buildings this time of year. Also in your package, can we just continue on?
Yeah, we're doing really well.
Okay, good. So, Mr. Porter. Okay, so we've been talking about the equity scam that our district is currently in the midst of. And second slide, if you can go to that, please. During the 2021-22 school year, we began the journey, and with the purpose of identifying promising practices as well as barriers that are impacting Indigenous student achievement and success within our system. The document that I've prepared for you that you have is an outline of what has been happening and how we're going to go about addressing these and identifying them. First off, before we can address them, we need to identify them. Next slide. The process. The district completes a scan based on 4 areas, and you'll see those areas a little later. The district report is completed based on those findings. Schools and department conduct a review or a mini scan in their areas, and then schools and department creates reports on their findings. Once all those reports are collated, we get them all together. We then develop an action plan for the district as a whole, and action plan for particular schools or departments within that, all with a lens of equity. Next slide, please. So there's the areas: policy and governance, learning environment, learning profile, and pedagogical core. And those are sort of the big areas within each that we'll be looking at. Next slide, please. So, again, we printed these out just to have a look at it. What you see in front of you are 32 questions that were designed for us to keep in mind as we go through each of the respective areas. Now, the nice part is, as a committee, both a steering committee and individual working committees. We will look at, so for example, the Learning Profile Committee, we'll look at those set of questions. And they will determine, are those the questions that we want answered? Or are there other questions that are applicable to us, more applicable? And we will customize this as we need. And so this is our template, our guide to start us off, to start asking, hey, here's the question, what else is there? Or does this really capture, will the information that we get from this capture what we're doing and what we're looking for? Next slide, please. So the steering committee, this is the group that'll start this. It's comprised of the chairs of each of the subcommittees, as well as other representatives. This is the group that'll look at the finished product when it's done. When we get all the reports together, and as we're developing it, and as we're asking the questions, this is the group that'll oversee it all. And you can see the representation on that committee. Invitations have gone out. This committee will have its first meeting on January 9th, Monday the 9th. It will then have an all-day session in Campbell River with other districts that are going through this on the 19th, I believe it was. It's in your handout. And yes, the 19th will be an all-day, and then the 24th will be the third steering committee meeting, after which the subcommittees will start, and they will then begin their work with the steering committee meeting occasionally throughout the process to touch base and get reports from our subcommittees to see where we're at. This is quite a lengthy process. Some jurisdictions it's taken over 2 years, 3, 4 years. Time really is, excuse me, it's completely dependent on what we find and how deep we go. So there is no timeline saying you must finish in X number of months or a year or 2 years. This is really the journey that we're going on together. Go ahead, Josh. And there's just policy, so policy and governance, which we'll have some trustee representatives on. Those are the type of questions you could look. So number 2, does your district have policies, practices, and governance procedures that support equity? Does your district have specific policy relating to access to Indigenous language and cultural programs? These are some of the questions that were used as samples, and we, as the Policy Governance Committee, when they get together, will look at this and say, there's some other questions we want to find out here. There's some other information we want, and we can add those questions in. That's the nice part about this scan. It's designed to be customized for our district, so that this reflects our reality in District 71. And again, Josh, we'll just go quickly so you can see there's a sampling of who we're looking for in on the Policy Governance Committee. As people can appreciate, it's when we look at this, we try to keep the committees in a reasonable size where if it gets too large, it's really difficult to get at the work, but we want a representation. So this is a sampling, this is who we think, and we may have to interchange, we may add, and some people may not want to be part of that, and we'll adjust accordingly. So the rest of, in your package, and Josh, let's just go to next one. So there's the Learning Environment Committee rep, representation. You can see who's on that one. We try, again, cross-section. And those committees, their very first task will be, what is it that you want to discover? What do you want to find out? And then the next part is, how do we go about doing that? Where do we dig? Where do we look? Where do we ask the questions? Pedagogical core. Go ahead, please. And there's representatives on those ones. And our last one, learning profile. And our last committee. And then finally, as I said to you, our timeline currently, there it is. Those are our for sure dates for January with the steering committee. And then of course, right after We want to wait until we return from the 19th from our meeting with the ministry and sharing with other districts. Once that has occurred, we will come back as a group with a steering committee, have some deeper discussion on what we learned, what we found out, what do we want to pass on, and then we will turn it over to our chairs of our subcommittees and task them with, hey, these are some key markers. We would like you to have your first meeting by this date, your second meeting by this date, as we progress throughout the new year, moving into the fall, and let this journey begin and make it a meaningful one. So we will be coming back to the board with updates occasionally as we go through this process. Right. And the last part of my report this evening, something that we haven't had to do this week, which is calling snow days.
Only Tuesday.
But I've asked our Director of Operation, Ian Hesselbrand, to just quickly go over, there's lots of things happen on the snow day and lots of questions that came up and have come out and phoned and emailed. And so I'm going to ask Director Hesselbrand to just shed a little light on this wonderful process.
Thank you, Superintendent DeMayo, for my 45 minutes. I thought fair is fair.
No, 50, I said.
Okay, 50. Excellent, thank you. I want to talk a little bit about busing in general and how we go into winter operations, because I think the two are really interconnected. I have a few notes here. I think the biggest thing is that this busing operation is exceptionally complex. You know, we move, we're quite a large district. We move somewhere around 2,500 students on a daily basis. This is just our regular routes as opposed to our inclusive education routes. We have 30 different routes. Most of them are geographically tied. We have one route, Route 850, that's in the last 2 years, is dedicated to Comox First Nation. We go all the way south to the old Temple Gas, for those that have lived on the island for a while, down around Fanny Bay, up north to the deepest, darkest corner of Macaulay Road. We do skirt along the water a lot, and we also go up to the top of the paved portion of Forbidden Plateau Road. So we cover somewhere in and around 2,900 kilometers per day just in the regular bus system, which is an awful lot of driving. And in that time, we pick up kids within a predictable 5-minute window, repeated every day, which is a pretty good accomplishment. A Hornby Island student has a tough day, for sure. They're probably on the bus for 2 hours, 3 buses separate, so they get picked up on Hornby, they're on a bus that races around Hornby, walk on a ferry, that bus backs down to the ferry pickup, they get on the Denman bus, they race around Denman, and then that ferry stops at the ferry terminal, they walk on, and then they walk up the hill to a bus that's waiting on the side of the highway. We're all really well aligned, and even with that well aligned, probably 2 hours. And then the return trip home is equally daunting. In general, we want a student to be on the bus 45 minutes or less. That's our goal, because any more than that is it's pretty tricky, especially for the younger kids. We try to balance our routes between volume, time, and cost. So that's sort of our regular scenario. So what do we do when we have adverse weather, like we had in the last couple of weeks? Well, part of it is dealing with the forecast. And I am, I guess, subscribed to several sites where I get weather alerts, particularly Environment Canada, gives that initial heads up. And usually I get phoned by about 15 different people that it's going to snow or is threatening snow. So a really good look at a detailed forecast. And then if we know in the morning that there's an opportunity that will have snowed overnight, Dave and myself, my team, we're typically starting at 4:30 in the morning. And I'll take 3 other drivers with me from the ops management team. And we divide the district into quadrants. Because it is such a big district, I always take the northern portion because I think that's the trickiest to judge. Somebody does Comox, somebody goes to Cumberland, and usually one person in Courtney. And hopefully we have a connection on Devon and Hornby that we can talk to as well. And we drive the roads. When we drive the roads, we're going down the main roads, and we're going down the side roads, and we scoot into the schools that are in that area. Have they been plowed by our contractor? Because we have about 5 different contractors. There isn't one contractor in the valley that Is it accessible? And accessibility is a really tough one because we talk about sidewalks as well and inclusion and everybody having an opportunity to get to school. And then we're also looking at what's going to come during the day. I often talk to Main Road first thing in the morning, which is our local contractor, and First Student. The team that's out driving, they'll phone me between 5:30 and 5:40 typically to give me an assessment. I synthesize that information with what I get from maybe First Student and Main Road as well. And then I phone the superintendent generally by 5:45 because we usually have to chat, right? And so we'll be talking about, and I attempt to present a reasonably cogent recommendation based on conditions throughout the district. And from there, a decision is made as to whether we're going to open or close for the day. There's always an element of uncertainty. We're living on forecasts. Some areas of our district, you can look out your window and go, what are they talking? You know, there's 2 inches of snow, and I've just been plowing through 12 inches of snow on Valley Road. It's really different. And so that spices up the decision. One of the things that we always try to do is make a district-wide decision. You'll notice in the last 10 days we had one point where we closed Miracle Beach only. We appreciate that our staff live all over the district and they have to get all over the district. And a school can serve a very large area. So it's tricky to play a game of we'll keep here, there, and everywhere under a different set of rules because our staff can be private in one place to another. When we are recommending a closure, from there, there's a communication element with IT and with Greg as well, our manager of communications, to get the word out. I have to speak to First Student before stopping all the buses from running because they're pulling out of the yard probably at 6:15 to begin those first runs of the day. And then monitoring the weather that day if the schools are closed. Our staff, I have a select number of staff that are in, we're working because we're trying to keep on top of the snow. And then it's a rinse and repeat for us. We're up the next day doing it until we really get to a place where we're comfortable that the weather's going to be acceptable. We don't have to have anything like that. So there's really a before part where we're trying to make an assessment, and usually the superintendent and I will talk that evening maybe and say, well, here's what I'm thinking. There's a in the moment part, and then there's an after part too. You know, after this last event, I've spoken with the general manager for Main Road because there were some areas they didn't do a very good job on. You know, and I've talked to the bus company about some things that maybe we can improve. And we've spoken about communications, and we've looked at ourselves and how we can tweak our route and our processes. So there's always an after part. Let's face it, living in this part of the world, if you're on Vancouver Island or in the lower mainland of BC, we are not equipped with the resources, nor are our municipalities, to really address snow fall. I've lived in the Maritimes, I've lived in Winnipeg. I was born in the prairies. It seems weird to me sometimes, some days, honestly, when we're making these calls, but it's appropriate because of our resourcing and staffing. It's like the 5 grounds people all available to do shoveling. We're not going to get every school sidewalk. We honestly are not. Right? So we are very resource limited on Vancouver Island between Main Road and the municipalities have to look after their own roads. So we have to be really aware of that. So sometimes, you know, we err a little being cautious, and we wear it both ways. You know, I had the angry mail of folks that you knee-jerked and what were we doing? And others who said, you know, for goodness sakes, folks, you know, anybody can do once. You know, so it's really, and others who are happy or on any day in the last 2 weeks for not wanting to be home because of black ice or wanting to stay at home because of black ice. So we're trying to thread a needle to find the best solution, and we really, it's real people such as myself, ops manager, capital project manager, and a custodial manager out driving the roads, attempting to make a call without mass judgment based on a snapshot in time. They got a whole long day unfolding out in front of you. So it's a human process, and we're trying to rely on a little bit of technology as well. And then honestly, in this community, we do our best and hope that folks step up and get some. Our ground staff were amazing over the last 2 weeks. As were a lot of the school leadership teams that helped out with schools here. So that's appreciated.
you, through you, Madam Chair, to Director Husselgrave. As someone who works in Black Creek and understands the 20 degrees in Courtney, 2 feet of snow in Black Creek and snow and ice, I'm wondering if Main Road does prioritize the school bus routes. And the reason I ask is I know that some of those roads today are still bad and there's no sidewalks out there. And for students walking to and from, I'm wondering if they really do look at our school district and our bus routes, and do they prioritize them, because they were really the last few years not all that great plowing them. And I'm wondering if as a district we might want to write them a letter and to encourage them to make our schools a bit more priority in their routes. Just a question.
Sure, no, that's a really good point, because we've had challenges in Black Creek around some of our bus routes. Bus routes are not priority number one. Number one is the main, is Highway 19A and Highway 19 and all the, and a few other routes. Bus routes fall in 2 and 3, depending. They have not done as good a job as they should. I meet with them in a pre-winter operations meeting where we clearly identify our routes in question. We clearly identified, I did to them about some of those roads out there. They're driving one, also all the others. And I've had a follow-up discussion with them so that information has been passed on loud and clear. They are resource limited, very much resource limited, but they can do better, and we're working on that. It has been clear. And I agree, I drive that area, that's my area in this trip.
Are there any other questions, comments?
And just a quick comment. Being from, a rural area also, and understanding like how difficult it can be to make those decisions. And I know you're on top of it, because I've now seen like 4 years of crazy weather and how you've dealt with it, so I appreciate that. But one thing that I think is really handy that's been happening about the snow day calls is when you're making those calls, how quickly everyone's getting that information. So I know I've had some feedback from parents in my community just saying having like the snow day on the text, like everyone's signing up for that. It's a huge accomplishment, and I think parents are, as soon as they can know it, it helps their day, right? So thanks for that.
Thank you. And Trustee Masak, are you with us? Oh, darn. Watch for her to unfreeze.
I think one of the challenges they experience there, just let it pause, is that in the rural areas, when we had delayed buses, there was challenges around communication. So we're working on new protocols, so the manager of communications and I have some new protocols. The other piece of the puzzle is, there really isn't a silver bullet when you have a registration system that's by email, but we are working with First Student to implement a system called the First View app, and it's a system called Focus. And what it will allow is real-time tracking of your child's bus route. You can set to download the app to the phone. If your child is on Route 825, you'll actually be able to see exactly where the bus is. That's a bit of the silver bullet for us. The trial is going to start in late January in a couple of routes. We should be into full implementation before the end of the school year. That would really help that very thorny communication issue around getting more details.
Thank you. Trustee Masak, are you with us now? Okay, did you have your question for us?
I am. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the presentation. And I was also wondering, in these situations, would it be prudent for us to look at collaborating maybe a little bit, or meeting, taking it to the next level with our municipalities and the contractor, Main Road, due to the fact that we do have rural areas that are actually not plowed for days and days after the fact. And we have, situations where, as Trustee Kate mentioned, there are no sidewalks. And I actually, on the way to the PAC meeting, one of my friends went in the ditch on the way to the PAC meeting, and the road had been cleared, but again, even the clearing of the road, there's a lot of snow that's being left behind. And these are not safe conditions also for parents who are dropping kids off and everyone coming and going. So I'm just wondering, how we can take some extra steps to try to deal with this in the community as a whole, I suppose, because a lot of the schools in town end up getting cleared a lot quicker because they're in the main area of town and maybe dealt with by a municipality as opposed to Main Road. Because, yeah, it can get really treacherous out there, and, you know, we had Miracle Beach closed for a couple of days when other schools weren't. So, just wondering what else we can maybe do.
Great, good question. Would you?
I have had follow-up meetings with them, specifically citing where our challenge areas are. It'll be dealing with large rural areas will be an ongoing problem, for sure. But I think we've highlighted the need for our schools to be cleared in more time.
Thank you, and thank you for your 40-minute presentation. And it probably could have been a 40-minute presentation.
Oh, I love
as
it.
well.
Yeah.
If there aren't any other further questions, we will move on to the Assistant Superintendent portion of our agenda tonight.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I can say after this evening with extreme confidence that my report will be the shortest one by far. Just wanted to give you a little verbal update on the Affordability Fund. Our schools are now using those funds actively, and it's great to see them spending the money. We received almost $1 million, and the schools are coming up with some very creative ideas. They've got grab-and-go meals, which is like a dinner and a take-home bag for students to take at the end of the day. They have in-class and in-school food tables. Food carts are brought into the rooms. They have reduced costs at school concessions and cafeteria programs. They have breakfast and lunch programs. And they're getting new and better equipment like industrial dishwashers, stoves, and fridges. And they're doing all of this trying to be as destigmatized as possible. We had a really great conversation with the student council, the district student council, last week, and they were talking about what stigma looks like in classes. And especially I just wanted to point out at Glacier View Alternate, the students there feel really supported at what's happening in their school because things are coming right into classrooms. Kids don't feel like there's a stigma into grabbing food. It's readily available all the time, so they feel like it's just if they need it, they take it and they take it home. So that's a really great feeling for us. On the Tier 2, Lush Valley program is now up and running. It's servicing over 300 school district families. And each family is going to receive a minimum of 10 good food boxes. They took a little while to get their infrastructure in place for their deliveries, but now they're in place, and they're feeling really good about that. And we have our first accountability report that's due at the end of January, and we're feeling like we're in a really good place. So we're hoping that we just continue using the fund. We'll see what the ministry says at the end of the day as to whether we'll get to roll over those funds or not. But there's lots of districts asking that question. I also wanted just to spend a little bit of time to talk about the VP pool. Director Lamoureux and Director Collier helped me interview some candidates for our VP pool, and I'm just happy to report that 4 candidates were successful up to this point, 2 in district and 2 out of district. And that's going to go really far in helping us as we move forward because we know that attrition happens and we know we've got to just be on the spot to replace those people as soon as possible. And now we have a little bit of wiggle room moving ahead. That's it.
Thank you. All right, over to the Secretary Treasurer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the first item on my report is the Statement of Financial Information, or the SOFI report. So this is an annual report that all municipalities and districts prepare to create financial transparency and accountability around expenditures and salaries and our remuneration for our elected officials. So it's an annual requirement that's required to be submitted by December 31st. And so there's a copy of the report in your board package, and I will turn it over to Director Hilton to talk about the briefing note and the process around gathering this information.
So, statement of financial information and briefing note starts on page 11 from our tonight. As Secretary Treasurer mentioned, it is an annual reporting requirement that's due at the end of the year each year. So it is a report that we bring forward for
have brackets in their homestay?
Is there a
So-
specific page?
Home,
Yes, starting 79. I'm just,
Homestay relates to our international students, so those are funds that the international parents pay to room and board their children. So it would be payments that are processed through our international education department. Two families. So that would mean they would probably have more than one student in their home. Currently, the remuneration is $950 a month for the homestay families.
Does that answer your question? Yes? Okay, super. Any other questions? Oh, Trustee Clayton?
I was just gonna move the recommendation.
Oh, please, yeah.
I
That was
move that
next.
the Board of Education, School District 71, Comox Valley, accept the statement of financial information for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022 as presented.
Second it.
Seconder, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Down, opposed? That's carried. Thank you.
Okay, and then the second item on my report was the additional item that we added this evening. So this is an item that was moved out of camera from earlier this evening. So it's an issue that arose from a Islands Trust permit process that identified an issue with the title on our property at Hornby Island. So we have two properties at Hornby Island. The larger piece of property is 2200 Solons Road that currently has the new elementary school on it. The second piece of property is a 1 acre piece of property that we discovered recently is not actually, the title for that property is not registered yet to the district. It was intended to as a gift in 1906, but there was two acre parcels that were donated at the time. The 1 acre was registered, our property was not registered. So we're moving this item forward to initiate a court process to register the title in the district's name. So we have had some documentation, we have had a lawyer looking at our interest in the property. We consider ourselves to be the beneficial owner of the property. We just have to go through a process of applying to the courts to have the title registered in our name. So we will begin that court process, and we will also do some public notifications around our interest in the property, and hopefully get it registered soon.
Thank you. Right. Questions? We will move on to human resources, and there were no retirements in December. Has this ever happened?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
There always seems to be at least one. No math tonight. Moving on to the board standing committee reports. The audit committee.
Yes, so currently the district has an audit committee, and again, that's another requirement of financial accountability and transparency, that we have an external audit committee that has members of the public that sit on the committee. And so our process previously has been to see if any community members would be interested in serving on the committee. We currently have 2 members that have served on the committee for the last 4 years, Deb and Jessica, and we would initiate a process just to see if there's any interest in refreshing the members, or if Deb or Jessica was interested in continuing on the committee. So we, in our current policy, and even in the previous policy, prior to the recent updates, there's not a time limit to somebody continuing on the committee, but we just would like to, as we, similar to the process where we go out to tender for our auditors every 5 years, we would like to initiate a process to see if there's any public members that would like to sit on the audit committee. So this is an information item for the board that you may notice in advertisement in the paper and on our website, to see if there's any interest in having new committee members join the audit committee.
Thanks very much. Any questions from the trustees on that? All right, we're right on track. I'm feeling good. Okay, we're almost, all right, board business. Trustee Caton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, as you mentioned earlier, we had our BCSTA Academy recently, where I was attending on behalf of the board as provincial council rep. And our motion that we presented in partnership with Saanich, talking about funding and meeting the inflationary cost, was passed unanimously by all 60 boards in the province. This is an issue that all districts are facing. Inflationary costs have impact on all districts, especially when it comes to facility grants. So hopefully we'll keep our fingers crossed that the ministry, because apparently they have lots of money, the government apparently, that they will look at school districts and understand the importance of funding our schools so they're a safe and inclusive environment for all students, and that hopefully that money will come forward. And that was great. And then the conference itself, I just want to touch base on some of the great presentations that we had on racism and discrimination, inclusive and accessible learning environments for students, and truth and reconciliation. Our district has done a lot of work. When I was going to these workshops and I'm listening to our director over there today, we've done a lot of work compared to other districts in the province, and I'm really proud of that, but there's more work that can be done in working with our community. I look forward in improving our students' experience in school, so it's a really exciting time that we're in. And I look forward to presenting our district in February, when BCSTA is considering a name change. And districts will be asked to consider that, and going from BC School Trustees Association, it's considering changing its name to BC Boards of Education, because BCSTA actually supports boards of education, not trustees, so that's something that the district, BCSTA, is coming to boards and having that conversation, and that will be something we'll be looking at as a district. Do we support that name change, and why are they doing it, and a number of factors, so that'll be something that they're looking at changing. And just to know that other provinces, Canadian School Boards Association, Alberta Boards of Education, Manitoba Boards of Education, so we are the anomaly calling it School Trustees Association. Most provinces do Boards of Education. And that's my verbal update on
Thank you for
my
the
meeting.
heads up, very much. Is there any other trustees that wanted to share anything before I move on to the trustee school liaison section of the agenda? Okay.
Sorry.
Oh,
just one quick
Secretary
comment.
Treasurer?
Sorry. We're receiving our December funding announcement on Thursday, so I'm hopeful that that motion that Trustee Caton brought forward might bear fruit this week. So, so at our, so just my hope. Fingers crossed.
Early Christmas
Good,
present?
Okay, I
good
was gonna
thoughts.
say cookies or something. Okay. And just for information, the trustees school liaison list is in the board package. And we will have our committee, the remaining piece of that, which is our committee list, at the January board meeting. Just there's that secondary piece that goes with that. So just so you know, we're working on trying to compile that for the trustees. The 2 weeks was a pretty short turnaround. So just stay tuned for more information on that. There won't be, you will hear more about it before the January. There is, I don't believe, any board correspondence that we have for this agenda package tonight. Is that correct? Superintendent?
Yes.
No, sorry.
No correspondence.
No correspondence. And now it's time for the public question period, and we may have it dual, virtual and in person.
Two virtual.
So there's 2 virtual. I'm just checking, is there any questions from the public that's in attendance? Oh, go virtual? Okay, well, I just thought you, the public who attended tonight made the, took the time to do so. So would you like to read the questions, both of the questions out?
Sure. First question. The presentation tonight mentions a collaborative work in our district as success. What will the committee for gender-based violence look like, and will it have representatives from trustees, DPAC, students, SD71 staff, and community?
Is the second question similar?
The
If-
second question is what?
Okay, all right. Superintendent?
Sure, I'll follow up the first question. So, good question. That was if you recall, in June, there were 2 motions that were passed. And one was to find out what we're currently doing and move and where we are as a district. As I explained, we had an inkling in August that there was going to be some change from the ministry, and decided to wait before proceeding, so that information came forth. And I asked Director Lamoureux and Director Dixon to present on that. I would then, based on the presentation and having trustees have the ability to digest this information, what was presented today at our committee of the whole, I would request that we have a discussion around that second motion, which was a committee, because the intent and purpose of the committee was never defined. And obviously we need to understand what is the purpose of having a committee, and what would the intent be, and we'll be back to trustees to have that discussion around that whole motion. So I'm going to respectfully ask that be put on our committee of the whole meeting for trustees to consider and provide further direction to myself through the directors around that question.
Thank you. And the second question?
Given that we are in a climate emergency and that the Comox Valley will likely see snowier winters and hotter summers, is it time the district creates a gatekeeper for extreme weather as an update to its snowy weather protocol?
It's yeah. I mean, I never thought I'd see a heat dome in June, and never thought it'd be an opportunity. You know, it's definitely something I think is becoming more frequent, and so yeah, it would force us to take a look at what that would mean for us as a district, whether it be what emergency procedures would we undertake as a district. So it's a very good suggestion, something that we probably should be considering, given the way things are changing. Having said that, now we probably won't see heat for a while, but no, it's definitely something we should be looking at.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
It's directed to Director Lamoureux. Through the board chair, sorry.
That's okay.
I didn't know if you were there, but it's you. Regarding the district reporting tool that was referenced earlier, that Director Lamoureux receives the reports from school counselors. When was that implemented?
Recently. So in the past, anytime there's been a disclosure, it goes to the principal. And they're part of that process. So the principal will always be part of that. And then recently, it's been asked to start looking at coverage of data.
Okay, follow-up question, so was that data collected before?
It was collected by administrators, so in that, any time there was a disclosure, the administrators were part of that process, because that's part of the protocol that we follow. And then McCreary has all that information in our specific Comox Valley. But in all honesty, we're asking the student to need new information comes up in the next 2 months.
Thank you for your question and your follow-up question. All right, seeing no further hands, no further public questions in the public question period, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Sure.